Edmonton, not one of us ever returned home to our home community. That's the disruption that's still affecting us today. And not one of us are communicating with each other. They destroyed the family, but more importantly, they destroyed the community and our culture. I'm maybe an exception to that in our family because I'm a drummer in our Gitchuga Gittimas dance group. Our daughter is a dancer, our granddaughter is a dancer. So we're doing our part because reconciliation to me starts with me. And then it builds from there. So thank you.
Two questioners left on round one. Senator McFedrin to be followed by Senator Watt.
Sorry, can I just ask supplementary, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, thank you very much for that. And I was very pleased that when you first started talking about we need infrastructure and facilities. The next step I hear is the government wants to fund us to run our own jails, which none of you said, and I was pleased to hear that because some of the successes of some of the communities in New Zealand that you talked about, some of the Maori communities, have been where they've taken those resources that have previously been put into other more oppressive types of interventions and developed schools and health facilities. And so I want to thank you very much for that and encourage if there's anything we can be doing to assist to please let us know that. Thank you.
Okay. Senator McFedrin to be followed by Senator Watt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for being here and for giving us such in-depth and rich information to help us with our work. I'd like to ask a question that's geared to youth leadership and picking up on the theme of economic development, how crucial that is. I'm thinking, for example, of one of the many young entrepreneurial companies, the Pontiac Group, and the recent proposal for the drone deliveries to isolated communities. If I could just ask, in a more general way, what you see as being specific resources, and if you have to share with us any specific examples of the way in which your communities, your organizations are focusing on supporting, galvanizing youth leadership in economic development.
Go ahead. We do have a young lady that's my cousin that's the rookie on our council. We've got her going on warp speed, really, in terms of all the work that's going on. A little bit of context: where I come from, we haven't signed a treaty, so we were in the negotiating a treaty until 2007, and we're moving into a direction now in terms of that on reconciliation, and people are throwing that word around. My young lady, that's such an inspiration for me because she has such energy, we've been developing her. We're negotiating a new agreement with one of our forestry proponents in our territory because we haven't ceded, released, or surrendered any rights or title. We've had a 20-year an agreement with a forest company in our area. So it's coming up for renewal, and I've got her involved in doing those negotiations because in the future we want to ensure that the people we leave behind are going to be able to do that. And we're going to be the people that are going to still be there. You know, we've been devastated by mountain pine beetle in my on my land base, and it's moving north and into Alberta, and now we're focusing on mining. We are in negotiations with mining companies for an economic participation agreement with them, and we're not just asking for jobs, we're asking for small businesses, we're asking for secure contracts, business contracts that's going to be of help to our community. And thankfully, we can do that. Because if we were in a different place and we didn't have the skills available to do all this work, we wouldn't be able to provide that for our youth. Over half the youth in SICA is under, over half our population is under the age of 30. And basically, it's my job to just create space for their future, create that space that's required. So we're changing the way we think, and we're making the opportunities available for the people. It's up to them to take advantage of it. We're in a complex community in terms of we also have a fentanyl crisis going on. 4 out of 5 of us have taken an naloxone training because we've had 12 close calls in SICAS. Fortunately, we haven't lost anybody. And we're trying to save our youth so they can have a future. When we talk reconciliation, it's like rebuilding a family. All the families in the community and all the communities that are in the carrier nation, and then all the people in British Columbia, and then moving on to the country. And in terms of governance, that's our job, is to start to create that new world and shift the paradigm. And economics are the only thing that are going to make the future generation able to live. But we also can't just have business and mines and logging. We also have to have land that some of us need to still practice our rights on. A lake where I can fish in. A lake where we can hunt, or land where we can hunt. Because under the Chilcotin case, we're not allowed to be, hindering our future generations' rights either when we make these decisions. And I don't know if I've answered your question helpfully. I'm just giving you a real perspective from my community of, you ask a good question. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Councillor Gale. So coming from the community of Fort Nelson First Nation, our community was very fortunate to have a chief who was who believed in education. And so in 1980, he was a part of the School District 81 for the local town of Fort Nelson. And he brought an elementary school to the nation, which was a modular unit. And that's how we started. Today, I'm proud to say that we have a school named Challow School, which is recognized by Canada as one of the top schools in this country for First Nations. I think that education is the key to our future and to ensure that our people can function in this society. Not only do we want those that have gotten into trouble or left because they couldn't heal in their own communities to come home, we want those that are going to university, post-secondary, and taking trades to also come home and to have something to come home that they can be proud of. Last week, we were very fortunate to honor our elders and have a luncheon with our community. We have 65 elders in our community. And with that comes a lot of guidance and expectation. When I see youth stepping up to the plate, standing up and using their voice, it makes me so proud. And when you're going through a general election and you see younger people putting their name forth, knows that you're making a difference. It's amazing. So striking the balance through economic prosperity and ensuring our environment is secure for future generations is very important. Us communities need to have the opportunity to work with investors, to work with proponents, local governments, municipalities, to talk about infrastructure that's going to happen on our lands, and to be a part of those projects in a meaningful manner than just jobs. One of the things that we have done as a community is made no-go zones, because there's nobody better to tell people where things should be built and where things should not be built. There's spiritual sites, there's gathering places, there's calving grounds. There's a lot of things to take in consideration when you're building a major project. So it doesn't make sense for people to come where your people have lived for thousands of years and are going to continue to live for thousands of years, to not involve you into a major decision that will affect our lives. We welcome economic opportunities as long as it's done right and meets the needs of our people. We cannot dry up our lakes. We cannot build roads that do not make sense. And this is why it's so important that we're involved. The best place for our people to come home to when they need to heal is to meet with our elders and to heal on the land. And if we don't have places to go, then we don't have anything. And our elders have always told us, if you take care of the land will take care of you. So not only are environmental assessments and those processes important when you go to decide on a project, but listening to the elders and the traditional knowledge that can't be proven by science means so much. It's amazing to be on the land and to talk to elders that gather their medicines and harvest, to hear what they have to say about the seasonal changes. For an example, this year we have lots of snow, tons. And winter is a little early and a little bit more colder. But I guess if you look on the bright side, we're going to have a white Christmas. And we get to go on the land and use the snowmobiles. But they tell you things like, well, we know that this is coming in the fall time. They're telling you this, that you're going to have this kind of winter. And you think to yourself, how do you know this stuff? But they're so connected to the land and to what is happening around them in their environment that they take note of that little bee going back to its nest up way high in the tree and not underneath the burrow of a log. And those things bring so much value and so much understanding of how life is connected. And that is why it is so important that First Nation people across this country have input and are part of these projects so we can decide and work with them on where things are going to go. When it comes to youth, I welcome any youth that would like to join me, not only in leadership, but just on daily life. There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot to learn, and I'm still learning. But one thing I would like to see change, not just for my community, is to see youth sitting beside you too. I would like to see, when I go to leadership meetings, is to see you guys bringing a youth too. Because we all know those youth that have potential, and we know the ones that are driven from the heart. So that's something I'd like to see change in all institutions, in all organizations in government. So, merci.
Thank you. I would just like to say that we have been inviting youth to the Senate committee for the past, about 4 or 5 years? And certainly it is our intention to include youth as a key component as we go forth on phase 2, for your information. Thank you so much. We only have about 10 minutes left. We have one questioner left on first round, Senator Watt, and 2 questioners on second round.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome being here. I guess, Harold, you and I known each other for many years, and I have always appreciated the connections that you and I have built in the past. And I do believe I even have a namesake in your family. And anyway, putting that aside for a minute, I guess there are certain aspects of what I'm hearing from you, and also Harold, in regards to financial matters that cannot be put aside, which is very important if we're going to succeed, moving in it towards having an autonomy of our own. By saying that, you mentioned that there are certain things that require additional recognition within the government. It might not be directly related in some areas, that if we want to have the capacity to be able to market ourselves at the international level and take part in the free trades by way of connecting ourselves with Aboriginal people in the country, and also not only the Aboriginal people in the other countries, but generally accessing economic base for ourselves. What are the areas that you feel that require additional recognition, being able to take it upon on our own hands, about our own capacity to move in the directions of international community and to try to help ourselves out by way of looking for potential investors? Still knowing the fact that we still have the question of title is still a problem today. We still have not resolved that issue. And we have made several attempts in some cases, especially in my area, to settle with the provincial legislatures and also the federal legislature. And I do have over 40 years of experience looking at the implementation from inside and also from the outside. And I do see that unless there is going to be a specific legislative base, we don't go very far, at least with this government and probably the government before that. Taking that into consideration, I wonder if you could enlighten me. What are those specific additional rights that needs to be recognized within the regime of Canada That's number one. Number two, what are the additional rights that still not being recognized? And even though that we have a constitutional rights and United Nations Declaration would free us from the handcuff of our own system, enabling us to reach out into international community. Those are the two questions I would like to put forward. I'm sure that you have put some thinking into that in the past.
Thank you, Senator. When I started, I talked about recognition. And we've talked about the need to have us involved in the processes. I think that what needs to be recognized is that there is unextinguished Aboriginal title in British Columbia, particularly land claims, that we do have entitlements to surface and subsurface rights, and that as an extractive sector economy that Canada seems to be, that First Nations need to be part of it. The international community is bewildered by the inability of Canada to address this issue. And that was stated in a meeting in Prince Rupert by the ambassador of Japan to Canada when we were in the height of the LNG and oil debates about corridors in the north. And they can't understand why Canada won't come to deal with this. And you could speculate on why, but I think the fundamental challenge that exists is recognizing that First Nations will generate wealth from their Aboriginal rights and title. And are we really prepared to accept that as an element of our evolving economy, that First Nations need to be involved in that exercise? I think that that's the first thing that has to happen, and that's where the Government of Canada and the provinces have to come to the fore, because Section 91, 24, 92 are the realities that we didn't bring about, you did. And so they got to come to the table and they got to be part of a solution. I think if we can do that, then the international community won't be confronted with the risks associated with unresolved issues. And that's the bigger challenge that we're going to face today, is that we're not the only place in the world where resources are available. And so if we want to be part of that, we have to do it not only responsibly, but we have to do it in a way that's timely and that's in a situation where the perception of risk isn't as significant as it is today. And I think if we can do those things, then we will open up ourselves up to opportunities to support Canada, ourselves, and the international community in doing the things that we need to do to support our economy. But it starts at the very top. It starts with Canada saying there are rights. It starts with Canada recognizing that every time a Supreme Court of Canada decision comes down, do we force both sides to go back to court to bring greater clarity for it? What the Supreme Court of Canada, I believe, has been telling us is go to the table and sort this out. We don't really seem to be willing to do that, and I think that's where it starts, and that's where this committee and the governments and political parties in this country have to come to grips with. We're far better off when we work together, as Councillor Gale has been saying. We're far better off when we eliminate the perception of risk. We're far better off when we recognize that there is a capacity gap in First Nation communities that needs to be bridged, both in terms of administrative and experience capacity, but in terms of financial capacity, capital capacity. If we can do those things, then we will help this Canadian economy, because the Canadian economy needs a workforce. We have the largest growing population. We can support that workforce. So if we can do those things, then I think we can achieve what you're saying. If we don't do those things, then I think we're going to be stuck in this process where the status quo will be there. There will be a perception of risk taken and opportunities may not be realized.
Not much time, so thank you.
Yes, thank you. We have a couple of minutes left if there's pressing questions for a second round. Senator Tanis.
One very fast one for Mr. Calla. You've mentioned the institutions that need to be developed. And Mr. Calla, I know you to have an active mind. Could you supply us with a list of what institutions you think need to be developed? And would you happen to have a nice chart that you could supply us with? Have you ever kind of penciled something out to say, this is how maybe this would all work? And would you be willing to share that with us for our research?
It's funny you would ask, because we are in the process of actually doing that.
Yeah.
We definitely know we need an infrastructure institution. We know that we need institutions that can correspond to some of the institutions that are involved in major resource development. Okay. We know that we need institutions that provide capacity to First Nations to engage with government. We need a bureaucracy. That's the reality. Now, I'm not smart enough to understand what all of that should mean, but we have a bunch of people who can help us do that. And that's the challenge that this government and Minister Wilson-Raybould has put to us. Tell us what you think you need. And be careful what you ask for. So now we're in a position where we're starting to look at those, many of us are starting to look at those things. So I don't have something I can table with you today, but I do have something we can table with you by the end of March.
Thank you.
Senator Rain, did you have a quick final question? Short?
No, most of my questions have been answered, but I have gone to the Coalition's website, which is excellent in giving us further detail on the governance and the structure and how the nations are coming together, and it's very, very informative. So I think all of us should be studying that as we go along. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. I'd like to thank, on behalf of the committee, our panel today, Mr. Dilo Edwards from the Coalition, Chief Thomas, Councillor Gale, Mr. Calla, and Chief Blackwater. You gave us really, I think, an outstanding testimony this morning. And the only thing I would like to say is I think one of the other things that came up that wasn't maybe so explicit is that Canada and Canadians really also need to recognize not just the rights of First Nations, but also the devastation of First Nation communities by the Indian Residential School, by the Indian Act, and I would also add by the murder and disappearance of many of our Indigenous women. And therefore, there are significant gaps, and we all want to move together forward from that. And today you've knit together all the pieces where it's about reconstructing healthy families, our children, our women, living on the land and everything that goes with that to create healthy communities that benefit not just the community, but the surrounding municipalities. So I thank you very much for that. And with that, we adjourn the meeting.